What if I told you that the prison you're trapped in was built by your own hands? You're not locked up by others' expectations. You handed them the keys. Keep watching, because understanding this could be the first step to breaking free from the invisible cage you've unknowingly constructed. Let's talk about the psychological cage, the prison you don't see but feel every day. This isn't about physical barriers or locked doors. It's about the silent limits you place on yourself, shaped by years of worrying what others think, fearing failure, and suppressing what makes you different. You built this jail with every action chosen by others, as Montaigne observed centuries ago. It's not guarded by anyone but you, yet it keeps you from the life you want. This cage starts forming early, often before you even recognize it. From childhood, you're taught to measure your actions against the expectations of others. What will people think? That question becomes your silent companion, shaping your choices and narrowing your path. With every decision made to avoid judgment, another layer is added to the invisible walls. These fears bleed into every part of your life, your work, your relationships, even how you see yourself. Over time, you stop asking what you want and start asking what will keep you safe from criticism. Society doesn't just let this happen, it rewards it. Everything around you pushes for conformity. Social media doesn't celebrate authenticity, it rewards the version of you that fits in. You're encouraged to polish your image, to play it safe, to never disrupt the order. Friends and family often reinforce this, urging you to chase goals that look good from the outside, even if they mean nothing to you. You learn to hide the parts of yourself that might attract judgment. You hold back your opinions when they don't match the group. You start to believe that fitting in matters more than standing out. Consider your daily habits. Every time you check your phone, what are you really seeking? Every like becomes a fleeting applause that leaves you more empty than before. The chase for external validation is addictive, but it's never enough. When the likes and comments disappear, so does your sense of worth. This habit doesn't just drain your energy, it distances you from who you really are. You become anxious when approval is missing, and that anxiety keeps you coming back for more. It doesn't stop online. In meetings, you hold your tongue, worried that speaking up might expose you. You hesitate to take chances, fearing that failure will make you look foolish. You avoid risks, not because you don't want to grow, but because you're terrified of being seen as less than perfect. These aren't just isolated moments. They're symptoms of a deeper problem, the fear that showing your real self will lead to rejection. Every time you shrink yourself to fit in, every time you apologize for your own needs, you reinforce the walls of your cage. Montaigne noted our obsession with approval only deepens the void inside us. We're taught that caring about others' opinions is a virtue, but when that care becomes your guide, it turns into a chain. You start to believe you're being considerate, but really, you're giving away your freedom. The world's expectations become your rules, and you follow them without question. The more you seek validation from others, the more you drift from your center, your true self. You become a stranger to your own desires, always chasing approval that never truly satisfies. The most dangerous part of the psychological cage is how it convinces you that you're doing the right thing by staying inside. It whispers that caution is wisdom, that safety is better than freedom. So you stay put, living a life built to avoid risk, never realizing how much you've lost in the process. Each year spent seeking approval leaves less space for the person you could become. You end up living someone else's life, not your own. But there's a way out. The moment you recognize the cage, you weaken its hold. Awareness is the first step, seeing the walls for what they are, not as protection, but as limits. You can't change what you refuse to see. By naming this cage and understanding how you've built it, you give yourself the chance to break free. And when you let go of the fear of failure or judgment, you gain something far more valuable, a taste of real freedom. Now let's reveal the illusion that keeps those walls intact, the myth of control. You think controlling every detail will bring peace, but this belief is one of your greatest traps. The illusion of control is a mental snare, keeping you preoccupied and disconnected from what truly matters. It promises security, but what it delivers is anxiety and silent desperation. You spend your days anticipating every possible outcome, convinced that if you just plan harder or work smarter, you'll finally get ahead of chaos. But the world doesn't care about your plans. No matter how meticulously you prepare, life remains indifferent, unpredictable, and often unmanageable. The more you try to control, the more you find yourself tightening your grip on things that were never yours to command. You micromanage your routines, obsess over minor details, and revise your actions until you're convinced you've achieved perfection. But perfection is a convenient lie we tell ourselves. Montaigne saw through this centuries ago. He understood that the search for flawless outcomes only leads to exhaustion and disappointment. Instead of bringing you closer to peace, your obsession with control isolates you from the present, making you a stranger to your own life. Think about how this plays out in your daily interactions. Maybe you find yourself overanalyzing every conversation, replaying words in your head, searching for mistakes or hidden meanings. You edit your responses, trying to anticipate every reaction, afraid that any misstep will be judged. This isn't just about caution, it's about fear. The energy you pour into controlling your image and your outcomes is energy stolen from living authentically. You become so focused on managing perceptions that you lose sight of what actually matters to you. Montaigne himself faced political turmoil and personal loss, teaching him that no amount of planning can guard against fate. His experiences showed him that the more we cling to control, the more fragile our sense of security becomes. The pursuit of control is not a sign of strength, but an exhausting battle against reality. When you try to orchestrate every moment, you end up living in a state of constant tension, never able to relax into the unpredictability of life. Instead of protecting yourself, you build another layer to your psychological cage. What's left after all this effort? You're left with a life that feels smaller, tighter, and less your own. You start to forget why you ever wanted control in the first place. Wasn't it supposed to bring comfort, clarity, or confidence? Instead, it builds routines and limitations that suffocate you. You become so focused on not making mistakes, on not letting anything slip through the cracks, that you miss the moments that actually matter. The harder you try to control your life, the more it controls you. The result is a kind of silent desperation, a life spent preparing for a future that never arrives, while the present slips away unnoticed. Montaigne concluded that releasing our futile anxieties brings unexpected clarity and freedom. He didn't advocate for recklessness or apathy, but for a wise acceptance of uncertainty. Life is unpredictable. Mistakes, setbacks, and surprises are not failures. They're simply part of being human. Montaigne's wisdom lies in recognizing that self-acceptance, not control, is the highest form of strength. When you stop fighting reality and let go of the illusion that you can shape every outcome, you make space for meaning and fulfillment. The greatest moments often appear when you stop trying to force them. Letting go isn't easy. It asks you to trust life in ways you've probably avoided for years. It requires you to look at what you're most afraid of losing and see that most of those fears are illusions, phantoms created by your need for certainty. Accepting that you can't control everything doesn't make you weak. It frees you to focus on what you can influence, your choices, your values, your authenticity. Letting go isn't about surrendering your agency. It's about gaining the clarity to see what actually deserves your attention and what doesn't. So, why does letting go of control feel so dangerous? That conflict leads us straight into the fear of losing approval, which we'll explore next. Approval from others seems harmless, sometimes even necessary, but the more you chase it, the more it slips through your fingers. Why does hearing someone say, "good job," feel so satisfying in the moment, yet so hollow once the moment passes? Why does applause pull you in with such force, only to leave you restless and wanting more as soon as it fades? External validation is powerful, even addictive. But like any fleeting high, it never lasts, and the emptiness it leaves behind pushes you to seek more, trapping you in a cycle that disconnects you from your real self. Let's be clear, the pursuit of external validation is a false promise. It's built on the belief that if you can just get others to recognize your worth through compliments, promotions, or even a flood of likes, you'll finally feel whole. But if you're honest, has anyone's approval ever truly filled that deeper void? Maybe it feels good when someone praises your work or acknowledges your effort, but how long does that feeling last? Minutes? Hours? Maybe a day, if you're lucky. Then it's gone, and the need for approval returns even stronger because you've trained yourself to believe it's the only way to feel valued. Every notification offers a hit of dopamine, yet Montaigne warned that these fleeting highs only distance us from our essence. You post a photo or share an opinion, waiting for the response. Sometimes you get a rush of likes and comments, and for a brief moment you feel seen. But when the feedback slows or doesn't meet your expectations, you're left hunting for more, like trying to quench your thirst with salt water. As Montaigne observed, the chase for external applause only deepens our insecurities. The harder you try to satisfy yourself with approval, the more you reinforce the belief that your value depends on someone else's reaction. This isn't just about social media. He challenged the idea that true success comes from external accolades. Maybe you've worked late into the night for a promotion you thought you wanted, only to realize the title means nothing to you. Or you've shaped your personality to fit expectations, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, dressing for respectability you don't believe in, nodding along when you disagree. Each time you do this, you drift further from your center. The more you seek approval, the more you lose touch with the person you once recognized but now barely remember. Living for approval turns your identity into a reflection of what others want, not what you are. Montaigne argued that authenticity is found by letting go of what we are not, rather than collecting the approval of others. If you stripped away everything you do for applause, what would remain? Your opinions, your ambitions, even your sense of humor. How much is truly yours, and how much is shaped by what you think the world wants to see? This cycle isn't entirely your fault. From childhood, you're taught that the opinions of others define your worth. A good grade earns a pat on the back. A kind gesture brings praise. These early reinforcements train you to seek value outside yourself. As you grow, the stakes get higher. Instead of stickers on a school paper, you chase promotions or social clout. Instead of approval from a parent or teacher, you look for it from colleagues, strangers, or followers. But no matter how hard you chase it, it's never enough. Why is that? Because what you're seeking isn't real fulfillment. External validation distracts you from your deeper insecurities. People don't seek approval because they're proud of who they are. They seek it because they're unsure if they're enough without it. At its core, the search for approval is fear in disguise. You cling to relationships, jobs, and identities that don't represent you because you're afraid to find out what would happen if you lost them. As the research explains, people live in fear of losing what they have because they have never allowed themselves to discover what would happen if they lost it. That fear keeps you stuck, holding on to roles and routines that keep you safe but never satisfied. What's the cost of living this way? When the applause dies down, you lose your voice first. Your opinions become hesitant. You start to wonder, what will they think? Am I good enough? Then you lose your sense of direction, choosing paths based on how they'll look to others, not how they feel to you. Finally, you lose connection to your own values and identity. The more you live for the crowd, the quieter your inner self becomes. Here's the truth. You can't fill a void within yourself with someone else's approval. Trying to do so is like shining a light on a broken mirror. The cracks remain, no matter how brightly you illuminate them. Real fulfillment comes from aligning your life with your essence, not from chasing applause, but from standing firm in your own truth. That takes courage. It means stepping away from a system that rewards performance over authenticity. Now you see why validation is a false promise. Let's discover Montaigne's true solution: detachment. Montaigne called detachment not indifference, but the path to freedom. He didn't mean turning away from life or becoming numb to experience. He meant freeing yourself from the constant tug of expectations, the need to prove your worth, and the anxiety that comes from always trying to please others. Detachment, for Montaigne, is about living on your own terms, being present, honest, and accepting that you don't have to prove anything to anyone. This is not a call to withdraw from the world. It's a challenge to live authentically, without the weight of unnecessary pressures dragging you down. Think about the endless scroll through social media. Every swipe brings another highlight, another achievement, another reminder of what you're supposed to be. You measure your life against carefully curated images, and before you know it, you're chasing a version of success that isn't even yours. Montaigne's philosophy cut straight through this noise. He believed that the more you let go of external pressures, the closer you come to your true self. This isn't about rejecting ambition or goals. It's about refusing to let them be defined by someone else's standards. When you detach from the need for validation, you start to see what actually matters to you, not what the world tells you should matter. Montaigne wrote that letting go releases us from paralyzing fear of rejection and needless approval. Every notification, every like, every fleeting moment of recognition is a momentary rush, but it fades quickly, leaving you hungrier than before. Detachment doesn't mean you have to quit social media or stop caring about your reputation. It means you stop letting these things decide your value. You can use these tools, participate in the world, and still remain grounded in who you are. The key is to recognize when you're acting from your own desires and when you're just trying to earn applause. The same principle applies to your career. Maybe you spend years climbing a ladder you never chose, pushing for milestones that don't mean anything to you. Montaigne saw this pattern long before LinkedIn profiles and performance reviews. He noted that striving to impress others steers us away from our true nature. The more you try to shape your life around what others expect, the less authentic you become. Detachment doesn't mean giving up on achievement. It means pursuing your goals for reasons that belong to you, not because you're desperate for approval or terrified of falling behind. Failure and perfectionism are two sides of the same trap. You fear making mistakes because you think they expose your flaws, and you chase perfection to avoid being judged. Montaigne believed that this fear is what truly holds you back, not the mistakes themselves. He saw errors and setbacks as essential to learning, not as evidence against your worth. When you accept that failure is part of life, you stop letting it define you. Detachment allows you to see mistakes as information, not as a threat to your identity. This shift opens space for resilience and growth, because you're no longer paralyzed by the need to appear flawless. But Montaigne's philosophy goes deeper than just stress management. At its core, it's about identity. He taught that fulfillment comes from living authentically, which requires letting go of everything you are not. He said that the more you release unnecessary worries, the more you gain. When you let go of perfectionism, you gain the freedom to be imperfect. When you let go of approval, you find confidence in your own voice. When you stop clinging to control, you gain clarity about what actually matters to you. Detachment isn't about losing, it's about recovering the parts of yourself you buried under fear and expectation. So, how do you put this into practice? It doesn't require a dramatic gesture or a public declaration. Detachment starts with a quiet shift in how you see yourself and the world. You stop chasing what you've been told you need and start trusting that you are enough without it. Imagine what it would feel like to set down the burden of needing approval, the compulsion to control every outcome, and the fear of being judged. What remains is your unfiltered self, the version of you that exists before compromise and performance. Ask yourself honestly, what would you find if you stopped holding on to everything you're not? This isn't about abandoning your life, it's about finally claiming it for yourself. Detachment doesn't mean pulling away from the world, it means engaging with it on your own terms, free from the chains of borrowed expectations. But if detachment is this powerful, why does letting go feel terrifying? That paradox leads us into our next topic. What you cling to most, your control, your identity, may be what keeps you trapped. It's easy to believe that holding on is the key to survival, that if you just grip tighter, you'll finally feel secure. But Montaigne saw through this illusion. He declared, "The more you try to control, the less control you have." The harder you work to maintain your grip on your routines, your status, or your reputation, the more you realize how fragile that sense of control really is. Instead of creating stability, it breeds anxiety and makes you feel more disconnected from yourself. Why is letting go so difficult? At the heart of it is fear. Not just fear of failure or disappointment, but the fear of meeting your real self without the masks you've spent years perfecting. Maybe you stay in a job that drains you, not because it fulfills you, but because it's familiar and offers you an identity you know. Or you hold on to a relationship that's long past healthy, terrified of what might be left if you walk away. Montaigne warned that we fear the void left by unmasking ourselves. We worry that if we let go of the roles, the titles, and the routines, there may be nothing left. That fear keeps you anchored to situations that no longer serve you, even when you know deep down that they're costing you your authenticity. This fear isn't just about the unknown, it's about losing the comfort of the familiar, even when the familiar is unfulfilling. You convince yourself that the pain of staying is less than the risk of leaving. But what's really happening is that you're avoiding the discomfort of facing who you are without those external markers. The paradox is that the more you try to control your life through these attachments, the less control you actually have. You become reactive, always adjusting to keep up appearances, to meet expectations, to avoid rejection. The result is a life shaped by fear rather than genuine desire. Think about perfectionism. You build an image for others to see, competent, successful, flawless. But the energy you spend maintaining that image leaves you anxious and hollow because deep down, you know it's unsustainable. Every mistake feels catastrophic, every setback a threat. Montaigne saw this as a trap. He believed that when you detach from the fear of failure or judgment, you gain something even more valuable: freedom. The moment you stop trying to live up to an impossible standard, you make space for authenticity. You start to act, not out of fear of getting it wrong, but from a place of genuine intention. Letting go is not about abandoning your responsibilities or becoming indifferent to life. It's about releasing the burdens that aren't truly yours: expectations, perfectionism, and the need for constant approval. Montaigne argued that most of our suffering comes from resisting reality. When you accept that life is unpredictable, that mistakes and uncertainty are part of being human, you stop wasting energy on what you can't control. You direct your focus to what matters: your values, your relationships, your present experience. The benefits of letting go are concrete. When you stop performing for others, your relationships deepen because you're no longer hiding behind a mask. You attract respect, not by chasing it, but by being yourself. Career decisions become clearer because you're no longer trying to impress anyone but yourself. As Montaigne observed, decisions are easier when they're based on genuine desires rather than perceived obligations. You stop living reactively and begin to live intentionally. The more you let go of what isn't truly yours, the more room you create for what is. But facing uncertainty is never comfortable. Most people spend years avoiding it, clinging to control because it feels safe. Yet the truth is, the safety is an illusion. The world doesn't bend to your plans, and the more you resist change, the more painful it becomes when change inevitably arrives. Montaigne believed that wisdom isn't found in conquering life, but in learning to dance with it. When you release your grip and allow life to unfold, you find a strength that doesn't come from perfection, but from resilience and adaptability. This is the paradox. When you loosen your hold, you don't lose yourself. You discover yourself. The masks, the roles, the self-protective habits start to fall away. What remains is the version of you that exists before compromise, before performance. It's vulnerable, yes, but it's also real. You stop living for the approval of others and start living for what matters to you. In that surrender, you gain a kind of freedom that control could never offer. Once you've let go and found freedom, the next step is rewriting the story you tell yourself, your most powerful tool. Every day, an internal narrative runs quietly in the background, shaping how you interpret your experiences and guiding your choices. This isn't just idle chatter. It's the lens through which you see yourself and the world. Research shows that these internal narratives act as self-fulfilling prophecies, reinforcing your beliefs and, in turn, your behavior. Montaigne warned against accepting dogma without question, skeptical of stories handed down as if they were unchangeable truths. The power of storytelling lies in its ability to define your identity, for better or worse. Consider how these scripts take hold. In Of Fear, Montaigne described how we carry a silent script of inadequacy that filters every experience. You walk into a room, and before you even speak, your mind recites the old refrain: "You're not enough, you don't belong." Maybe you've absorbed the story that your worth depends on reaching certain milestones, earning the right degree, landing the perfect job, finding the ideal partner. When those arbitrary goals remain out of reach, disappointment doesn't just sting, it seeps into your identity. Or perhaps you've lived by the script that says you must always put others first, sacrificing your own needs for someone else's vision of who you should be. Over time, you wake up feeling like a stranger to yourself, unable to remember when you last acted from your own desires. Montaigne's essays are filled with observations about how easily we inherit these scripts. He saw people accepting roles and stories that never truly fit, often out of habit or fear of questioning what they'd been taught. It's not just that you believe these stories, they become the framework for your life, quietly dictating your decisions and limiting your sense of possibility. Montaigne's skepticism of inherited beliefs echoes in the modern realization that many of us live out narratives that don't align with our authentic selves. You're not trapped by who you are, but by who you've been told you must be. The act of reclaiming your narrative is not just a personal project, it's a radical break from passivity. Montaigne wrote, "By letting go of what we are not, we see what we are." This is where transformation begins. If you stripped away every story that never belonged to you, what would remain? It's uncomfortable to confront, because even the most limiting scripts feel familiar. They've guided your choices for so long that imagining life outside them feels almost dangerous. Yet questioning those inherited stories is the only way to make space for growth, creativity, and self-discovery. Rewriting your internal narrative means accepting that your story will never be perfect or seamless. The most powerful stories, the ones that actually move you, are never tidy. They're full of contradictions, shifts in direction, and moments of doubt. Montaigne understood that embracing these imperfections is not a weakness, but a source of strength. The richness of your life comes from the questions you're willing to ask and the uncertainties you're willing to face. When you allow your story to include dark zones and ambiguities, you find the space to evolve. It's in those messy, unresolved chapters that you grow. Most people spend their lives as supporting characters in a story written by someone else. They follow the script, study hard, get the promotion, keep up appearances, stay safe. But what happens when you step out of that supporting role and claim your place as the protagonist? The story changes. You stop living by inherited scripts and start making choices that reflect your values, not someone else's expectations. The act of rewriting your narrative lets you turn so-called immutable truths into possibilities. Every failure becomes a lesson, every mistake a pivot point. Even the hardest chapters, loss, doubt, pain, can be reframed as turning points that lead you closer to yourself. This isn't about erasing your past. It's about reframing it, seeing every chapter as part of a larger, evolving story. When you take authorship of your narrative, you move from being a passive observer to an active participant. Montaigne saw this as the heart of self-knowledge, the willingness to examine, question, and rewrite the story you live by. The narrative you choose doesn't just shape your future, it changes how others see you and how you see yourself. It's a strategy for living, not just for surviving. So, what story do you need to rewrite to step into your true role as protagonist? The answer to that question is the threshold to everything that follows. And that brings us to the moment you stop caring about the wrong things, your final step toward real freedom.